How's it going, everyone? It's Friday, January 10th. Let's talk PlayStation. So a very interesting news week, as you're probably aware already, and you can tell by the title, you know what this video is going to cover, which is, well, this past week, CES was going on. CES is the Consumer Electronics Show. Every year this happens. Major hardware makers come out and show off some of their new tech. And Sony's always there, and usually they'll always show off, you know, their new televisions, their new cameras. 4K is a big thing. UHD is a big thing this year. Everybody's showing that stuff off, and Sony had two conferences during CES. Now, usually Sony doesn't do too much PlayStation stuff, so we usually shouldn't expect much PlayStation stuff, but in their second conference, there was actually a lot of very interesting PlayStation stuff. Now, before we get into PlayStation Now, which is the name of Sony's new streaming service, let's talk about some sales figures, which is Sony has now publicly stated that they have sold 4.2 million PlayStation 4s up until December 28th. So it's not even completely up to date to this exact day, but they're at 4.2 million right now from where it stands. The previous number that Sony publicly stated was 2.1, but if you checked up with MPD and the sales numbers, you could see it was hitting 2.5, and then it hit 3.1, and it's no surprise that it's now at 4.2. It launched in many territories, and despite Sony having a problem keeping these machines in stock, they're selling quite well, obviously, which is fantastic. And to boot, 9.7 million PlayStation 4 software has been sold. So 9.7 million PlayStation 4 games have been sold, which is a good starting attach rate for the system. As I've said many times, as it's well aware, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, they all make their money through software. Through software. They generally don't make it through hardware, which last week, by the way, when I mentioned that Sony takes a loss on every PS4, a lot of people brought up the article and that news story that it's actually it takes Sony $380 to manufacture one PS4, so that people would assume that they make about roughly $20 of profit on every system. Sony has already publicly stated they take a loss on every system, and it just doesn't quite work like that. Just to make it clear that I am well aware of that story, but the fact that there's a $20 difference, like, you know, margin of making the systems in profit, that does not mean that they're making profit on each system. In fact, they are definitely taking a loss, considering they still have to pack cords, documentation, box this thing up, ship it to retailers. The retailers got to get a cut of the system. There's R&D for the PlayStation 4. They're not making profit on the hardware. There's no chance they're doing that. So they make all their money back through software, and it's good that a lot of PS4 software is being sold. And that's really about it. I mean, PS4s are being sold. These are really, really healthy numbers. I mean, Sony's already closing in on the Wii U's lifetime sales, which, you know, whatever, that wasn't really going to be hard to do anyway. And if you want to, like, look in, you know, the console war thing, Microsoft recently announced they're at 3 million systems sold, so Sony's got a healthy lead. And it's looking good for them. But, you know, as always mentioned, Microsoft's a strong competitor. This is the long term, and Sony even knows that. And they always publicly are saying that, you know, despite their higher numbers in the competition, it's about the long term. So. But anyway, let's go into the major talking point of this video, which is PlayStation Now. So at CES, Sony Computer Entertainment President and CEO Andrew House took the stage of the CES conference to announce PlayStation Now. So, for how long now we've been talking about this stuff? Sony purchased Gaikai for $380 million. It was announced at the PS4 event of what they were doing with Gaikai and what they wanted to do with it, but they were very vague. They didn't, you know, say a whole lot of details. They kind of made it seem like at the long term what they want to do with the service, and now we're finally getting to the point where we're hearing more about it, and this is the name of that streaming service. So they weren't going to call it Sony Gaikai or just Gaikai Streaming Service. They got to give it a name. The name is PlayStation Now. Basically what this news means is I'm going to be repeating a crap load of stuff that I've been repeating for how many times on Let's Talk PlayStation, because it's still kind of the same stuff we know, you know? The PlayStation Now service is about streaming PlayStation 3 games to PlayStation 4 hardware, PlayStation 3 hardware, PlayStation Vita, and even non-Sony devices. We've been talking about this for a long time, and this is what Sony is once again still saying. So, as of right now, they're focusing on PlayStation 3 games and a very few select amount of titles. In fact, at CES, on the show floor, you could play God of War Ascension, Beyond Two Souls, and The Last of Us. And you could play these games on Sony Bravia TVs, you could play them on a PlayStation Vita, or you could just yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. But there is actually a couple of good details that we did get out of this, and you know, some things that we didn't know before. So one thing being, like, PSN support is going to be is going to be there. So if you are, for example, using a Sony Bravia or a non-Sony device like a tablet, for example, this is one of those situations where you're logging into your PSN ID and you can still, in some way, shape, or form, sort of use your friends list, play online, earn trophies. Like, that integration's still there no matter where you're playing the game on. As of right now, Sony still has the same tone that they've always had regarding the streaming service, which is it's for the long term. They're not promising like hardly anything up front. They said a few games. They're telling you right now, this is not backwards compatibility. This is not their answer to backwards compatibility. I think backwards compatibility. And I think the reason why they're saying this is because they know for a fact they're not going to get every PS3 game on this service. Their first party stuff you have to expect is definitely going to be there, but they're going to have to do a lot of negotiations with getting this third party stuff up and running, you know. So, you know, they got to pick and select certain titles. I mean, it's kind of like when you look at like PS1 classics or PS2 classics. Why isn't this there? Why isn't this there? It's just one of those processes, you know. So you can't expect every title to be there at least on day one. So they're telling you right now like it's not backwards compatibility. And they're also making it very clear that you don't own any of these titles. PlayStation Now is a subscription streaming service. So they're looking into how they're going to work it into PlayStation Plus, if they will perhaps do that. But if you're expecting this to be free with PlayStation Plus, you're out of your gosh darn mind. This is a lot of money and it takes a lot of resources and all that. This will be a separate subscription fee to access all of these games, and they're also saying that you could do a rent per title, you know, basis. But it doesn't seem like they're putting any sort of ownership into these titles. You know, it's like Netflix. You don't own anything in Netflix. You're paying it every month. It's basically renting. So you are going to have to keep investing your money if you want to keep playing these games. They've also confirmed that if you perhaps own a game physically, you can't just access the streamable version of that game. You can't put like the Last of Us disc in your PS3. Your PS3 reads it, and then you can just start streaming the game like that. Like they're saying no for that right now. And in fact, when Sony was asked if they were considering it, they said no. So that is not even on the table right now. If you happen to own physical games or even digital games right now, you're not going to be able to just sort of Sony's not going to be like, okay, you own it. You can use the streaming service for free. One very important thing about this whole streaming service is it going to work? You know, there's a lot of skepticism about this. You know, streaming games like OnLive did it. You know, there's actually a lot of companies that did this sort of thing, and it certainly works, but we want to make sure Sony's version of it works. So what people are saying at the CES show floor is that it works. You know, it absolutely works. There's obviously latency. It's just how bad it is, and they're saying it's not that bad, certainly. What Sony is officially saying is you want to have 5 MB per second of an internet connection if you want this to run good. Under their testing, 5 MB per second of an internet connection is going to give you the best experience, and anything higher is of course going to give you an even better experience in terms of resolution and latency. And if you perhaps dip lower or dip below that, you're going to get bigger latency, and you're going to get possibly a resolution cut, and you know, it's going to look decompressed. There are a lot of concerns regarding PlayStation Now. It's certainly an ambitious idea, I will say that. But stuff like this has existed, and it does work. This technology is there. It's just a matter of if Sony can execute it properly. I mean, my internet connection is above that threshold, and I will be able to enjoy PlayStation Now when it launches, hopefully, if, you know, everything goes all well and good. And I don't want to speak for everybody, because I know there's a lot of people, large majority of the U.S. is below that threshold. So I don't want to speak in regards to the whole internet connection speed thing, but I think 5 MB per second, it's not bad. You know, that's a pretty decent threshold. I guess one really cool benefit of using PlayStation Now is you're getting the most up-to-date version of a game. You know, when we pop in old PS3 games, we gotta sometimes download patches that take upwards to 30 minutes or longer. But if you're using PlayStation Now, there's no installing, there's no downloading, there's no nothing. You're getting an instant access of the game on their servers, the most up-to-date versions. That's pretty cool. There's certainly a lot of advantages to this. I guess it just begs the question of if you're down with this service, and if Sony makes it a really compelling experience to you. And it's not just PS3 games. That's their initial goal. Andrew House has, of course, said that they want to do PS1 games. They want to do PS2 games. They want to have their legacy PlayStation titles, which is a vast majority, such a long, outstanding You know, it's a huge library, right? In fact, whenever somebody tells me, like, I've never owned a PlayStation system, I kind of look at them and go, then what the hell have you been playing? Because, like, you know, PlayStation's a big part of video games. There's so many, there's a huge library. So Sony has a lot of potential to tap that library, you know, if they want to make the streaming service successful. In fact, if anybody is going to be able to make a streaming service of games successful, it can certainly be Sony because of their catalog. And I've said this before, it's great that they're future-proofing themselves, you know, to have this possibly beyond non-PlayStation hardware, so they can use this on tablets and smartphones and televisions. And as of right now, it's only going to be when it releases come spring 2014. It's only going to be for 2014 Sony Bravias and, you know, PlayStation, you know, PS3, PS4, PS Vita. But they have said they are going to move outside of Sony devices, outside of their brand. But that's a good thing because that's money for them, you know? And it will even encourage people to buy PlayStation hardware. You know, they start playing a PS3 game, they get trophies or something, they meet friends or whatnot playing online, and they think, you know, why don't I just get a PS3 or a PS4? Like, that's just how it could possibly work for somebody. So for right now, that's pretty much all we know about PlayStation now. We know its name, we know some requirements for it, we know about the long term, what Sony wants to do. They're telling you it's not for backwards compatibility. Again, we really knew a lot of this stuff even before the service had a name, but we do have a couple of more tidbits about it, and we can expect more once it launches in summer, which, by the way, I think I just said spring, which I was wrong about, because I just checked. So it's going to come out 2014, summer, and it's only for the U.S., only for mainland U.S., so no Canada. And again, Sony also said about Europe, like, they've got issues there, so they're not promising anything right there because there's all these different ISPs out there, and they got to work out the data, and so they're not promising Europe anytime soon right now. There actually is a closed beta at the end of this month, so hopefully certain people get invited, or you can actually go sign up. So hopefully, maybe I'll get in it or something. I don't know. It'd be cool because I could test it and stuff, but you know, so that's pretty much it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. And just a little heads up, Amazon started selling a white PlayStation Vita just standalone for $199, and the only time we've ever had the white Vita available was in that Assassin's Creed bundle, which is now gone. So just interested, thought I'd give you a little heads up about that. But anyway, guys, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you for talking with me, and I'll see you next Friday. This thing's so fucking cool, dude.